This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
I am already excited about this Week 16 slate across the NFL with a massive matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers lurking on Monday night. And that game could go a long way towards deciding who is MVP this year. The top two MVP candidates right now at FanDuel Sportsbook are in that game, Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson. I've actually got a bet that I like in that game, which we'll talk about later on. We're also going to break down the MVP market, talking about whether there is value on the board, with Purdy now being minus 200. We're going to talk AFC and NFC South and get Ryan Williams-Reed in the futures market over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Tuesday by Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at @RyanAlexander_W. And Ryan, not only did you nearly sweep the board last night with your recommendations for Eagles versus Seahawks, but also your guy, Drew Lock, a Mizzou grad like you, but also you mentioned before the show, went to your high school. So, could Monday have gone any better for you personally?
Oh, I mean, it was great to see the kid succeed. I mean, great post game interview with Lisa Salters there at the end, and just awesome to see. When a guy like a backup comes in and had the game against San Fran a week before, kind of struggled in Denver, gets traded, and then have a game like that where the team's just rallying around you. Geno Smith's rallying around you, the starter, and that's got to be good for his confidence, great for his confidence, and especially as they look to shape up the playoff picture for themselves to get into the wild card. Knowing that exists in the realm of possibilities, to have a backup quarterback who can come in and be ready to play is got to feel great for him. So I'm sure he celebrated mightily last night, and hopefully he's ready to get back after it this week.
Pete Carroll definitely did. He had a backwards hat on during the press conference. It's like always a thing when Pete Carroll wears a hat. So not only did he go hat, he went backwards hat for the press conference. So the Seahawks people were going nuts at that. And I'm thinking about this NFC playoff race, Ryan, as a viewer. And I thought going into the year that the NFC wildcard situation would be kind of meh, whatever. But when I think about the teams that I want to watch, in the AFC, I want to watch the Bills. I want them to make because I want to watch the Bills in the playoffs. For the NFC, I like watching the Rams. I like watching the Seahawks. I think the Packers are pretty fun. So, there aren't a lot of bad outcomes, I don't think, in the NFC. And honestly, that kind of surprises me. So I think the NFC is fun. I know that, the take has been a long time that they're good, but I want to add on that they're actually kind of fun. So this playoff race, Ryan, down the stretch has been, I don't know, kind of fun to track, honestly.
Yeah, it's definitely been, fun for the viewers, fun for the fans, to know that, you're pretty much, there's only 4 teams who have been out of the playoff picture for a majority of the year. But some of these teams who have still been in it, it's been great to see. I mean, I guess in the AFC, we kind of have the usual suspects, pretty much till 8-9. But yeah, in the NFC, I mean, my goodness, Chicago and the Giants were still in it, as of last week before the losses. So it's just wild. It's wild.
Yeah. It's been more fun than I thought it would be. Given all the quarterback injuries, it could have been pretty gross, but I think things are setting up pretty well down the stretch. We're going to talk about those playoff races, specifically honing in on the AFC and NFC South divisions right now over at FanDuel Sportsbook. 3-way tie in the AFC South. We'll talk to Ryan to decide if there's value there for him right now, but also talking NFC South. Desmond Ridder officially benched this morning for the Atlanta Falcons. So we'll break down that, if that impacts the NFC South at all, and take a look at that MVP race as well before I dive into what my numbers say about Week 16. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. 4 shows for this week because of the Christmas holiday. So no show coming up on Friday, but we will still have NBA, NHL thoughts tomorrow, and then we'll have our full NFL Week 16 preview with Dr. Ed Feng coming up on Thursday. So make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, be sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also find this podcast in video form over on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. Let's take a look at that MVP market, Ryan, where right now Brock Purdy is the favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook, down to minus 200 to win MVP for this year. And obviously, you could bet Purdy at that number, but also with Purdy being that short, odds have lengthened elsewhere. So any value for you elsewhere, or is Purdy well positioned enough, Ryan, where you're staying away from the market as it currently stands?
It's just so crazy to see Purdy up there. I remember, when San Francisco was reeling, kind of heading into the bye. I believe we talked about him, and his odds were like plus 1,600, 1,800, something in that realm, and kind of said like, hey, if the passing touchdowns end up, going to people other than McCaffrey, Purdy could see himself in that scenario. And now here the scenario presents itself where Purdy at the top, Mr. Irrelevant. It's just absolutely incredible. I do think there is value, though, in Lamar Jackson. We talked a couple weeks ago. I still thought Josh Allen was a little bit out of the race, but I mean, my goodness, the 2 victories that they've had recently, over top echelon teams in the Chiefs and the Cowboys, and then you're thinking about they get another matchup with Miami. I guess Josh Allen's back in the mix, but Lamar is really the one, and they have a direct matchup that's coming up, right? So like if Lamar goes out there and outperforms Brock Purdy, that could be some merit to make him the favorite. And then Baltimore's kind of got a little bit of a course to get Lamar that MVP trophy yet again. It does feel like the 49ers are going to end up with something, with the way that it's been going. I don't think Christian McCaffrey closes the gap on he already has minus 160 to plus 125 for offensive player of the year. Tyreek Hill had been there at the top for some time, and now with that injury, it still feels like Tyreek has a lot left in the tank to be able to close that off. But I just don't see the 49ers getting swept out of all these awards. So it makes it tough. But I do think that direct matchup is enough to take Lamar Jackson at 5-1, seeing as how he's been, pretty much at the top of the favorites, at least in the top 4 for the past like 7-8 weeks or so in this market. So we'll see what Lamar Jackson has left. I do think it's interesting too, and Keaton Mitchell, my goodness, what a dynamic player, and that's going to be a tough loss for the Ravens, who once again find themselves in injury purgatory for another year. But this could definitely mean more rushing upside for Lamar to be able to close that gap where, he's pretty much, I think he's sitting around 3,100 passing yards and things like that. It's the way that they play the game and the way how dynamic he is in moving the ball for them. So statistically, if he can add on, maybe a couple close to 100-yard rushing games to end out the season and Ravens win out, I think that he's looking at taking home hardware.
So I agree with you in that the 49ers cannot be held out of these markets because of how good they are. I actually show value in them to win that game on Monday against the Ravens. We'll talk about that in the look ahead stuff, but that could be Purdy. But also Purdy in his press conference on Sunday said, I think it should be Christian McCaffrey. George Kittle on Monday said, I think it should be Christian McCaffrey. Does that give you any interest in McCaffrey at 16-1 to win MVP, not offensive player of the year? Because he's going to have a showdown, a showcase event on Monday too. What if McCaffrey has a vintage McCaffrey game in that one? Could that potentially tilt the scales his direction? Because I think a lot of people are looking for reasons not to vote for Purdy, which I think is misguided because I think he's played really, really well this year. And yeah, it's a good system, but he's commanding the system like the best we've seen. So are you tempted at all about McCaffrey at 16-1? Because honestly, Ryan, I am. And I'm at the point where I kind of need to be talked out of taking McCaffrey at 16-1.
Yeah, I mean, there is some interesting merit to it. It's just such a heavily favored quarterback award, especially if we see Tyreek Hill pop off as of late. So then you're looking at like an offensive a quarterback not getting either one of the offensive
Right.
awards for the year. I don't know the last time that's happened off the top of my
Right.
head, but that seems like really out of whack. Maybe when Adrian Peterson won for running back at the MVP status, but Christian McCaffrey. I mean, this guy's just absolutely incredible. It's hilarious to think about, the decision when people had their redrafts on who to take, Justin Jefferson or Christian McCaffrey. That looks very tough. And, just the fact that Christian McCaffrey's been able to make it through the year, unscathed, I have to knock on wood now because there are 3 games left in the season. But, everybody's talked about his durability and his health, and just so happy for him to be able to go out there and really it just is unfair what the 49ers were able to get from Carolina from them. I mean, Carolina fans have to be kicking themselves with the way trades have gone over the past couple of years. But yeah, 16-1, I guess, if he the thing that Christian would need to do, and Raheem Mostert is so far ahead from him in the rushing touchdown market. I think he's 6 behind, 19-13 is the comparison. If he can get the receiving touchdowns, Purdy's, still making moves, but they're all going to Christian McCaffrey, kind of similar to this last week that we saw. I think he could maybe, close the gap there. If Lamar kind of peters off, doesn't do too much, Josh Allen, he peters off, and that isn't able to make it to the playoffs. I think Dak Prescott, with the way that they kind of played against Buffalo, I kind of write him off. I had written off Josh Allen for a little bit, so there is some interesting merit. But I do think at the end of the day, Jim, if he goes out and balls out, it just so much so solidifies Offensive Player of the Year for him versus MVP.
Yeah, I think that it is definitely there are obstacles to McCaffrey winning it. It would probably if Buffalo keeps doing what they're doing and they're 10.5-point favorites this week, it could be Josh Allen above McCaffrey, and then they just give McCaffrey Offensive Player of the Year. But the narrative of the 49ers pushing McCaffrey it's caught my attention, is what I would say. I also think that Kyle Shanahan should be shorter than 8-1 to win Coach of the Year. That's kind of absurd to me, honestly. He should be shorter than that. He deserves it. If we're going to credit the scheme to downplay Brock Purdy, maybe give Kyle Shanahan Coach of the Year to account for that. But that's just my own personal thoughts on that one with Shanahan. Let's talk here about the 2 South divisions and their races now, and where the odds stand for the NFC South, or the AFC South, I should say. The Jacksonville Jaguars are -112 because this is now a 3-way tie for first place in the South. And now Trevor Lawrence in concussion protocol, and up in the air as to whether he will play for this week. Colts are +280 and the Texans +290. Ryan, anything stand out to you as far as value when it comes to betting the AFC South right now?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we'll talk about the NFC South, and pretty much have been beating the drums for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the past 3 to 4 weeks on this show. And that's who Jacksonville is playing this week, in Tampa. So, I'm of the mindset that Jacksonville is going to come into this game, lose again. And then I think that kind of squarely, opens things up for the Colts and the Texans. I do think the way that, Case Keenum has come into the fold for CJ Stroud there, and just, being a proven commodity quarterback as a backup with a couple playoff victories under his belt. I think, the Houston Texans outlook does feel pretty strong. We've talked about them this year, Jim. It's just so hard, not to root for this team who was at the really bottom totem pole of last year, and then has a chance to make the playoffs. So definitely pulling for them. Indy with Gardner Minshew, I think there is still some interesting plays, for them. I do want to, kind of see what the health of the offense is looking like, though. I know they had some rough injuries this past week with Michael Pittman leaving the game. I believe Zach Moss left the game as well, too. And those are 2 key pieces on offense that I don't think they can afford to, miss down the stretch here with 3 games left. So I'm going to take Houston at +290 and just ride that out and see what kind of magic we can get, and if CJ can come back for the final 2 games of the season, if not this week.
I think he can this week. I know they said he's still in concussion protocol. That's a technicality. He can't clear without practicing, and they haven't practiced since Saturday. So he's still in there because he hasn't practiced. So I think he'll go this week. I'm not sure on Nico Collins. He was questionable on Sunday. without practicing, so maybe he goes, but that one's more up in the air. But when I look at my numbers for this week, I show a bit of value in the Texans -2.5 against the Browns. I show value, kind of like you alluded to, in the Bucks against the Jaguars. So like that kind of implies that I think that both the Texans are undervalued and the Jags are overvalued for this week specifically. And obviously with just 3 weeks left, that correlates heavily to this market. So I think I agree. +290 for the Texans is kind of fun. They get to face the Colts on in week 18. That game could be amazing. I really hope both those teams are still involved. That could be a fight for the AFC South crown, depending on how things go for the Jags the next couple of weeks. So I'm pumped about this division. I agree with you that the Texans might be undervalued. I've been on them this entire year, except for this past week. I did bet against them. That did not go well. I deserve that for betting against my guys. So you get what you deserve in me betting against the Texans, but not going to do that this week. I do think that the Texans +290 is pretty intriguing. NFC South, Ryan, you talked about the Bucks when they were like +480, I think, maybe even a bit longer than that to win the NFC South. And now they're down to -134. Saints are +188, Falcons +640 as they now shift to Taylor Heineke as their starter. But like huge matchup coming up in week 17 between the Bucks and the Saints. Bucks taking on the Jags this week. The Saints get the Rams. When you look at this market, Ryan, what's your read on this division right now?
Yeah, well, I can't even believe the odds are listed there with Taylor Heineke, back in the mix. Desmond Ridder. I mean, they are just. We'll have to get into them at some point, Jim. We haven't talked about the Falcons really all year, but what a debacle it has been for Arthur Smith since being there. So I can just write them off. It does come down to New Orleans and Tampa Bay. And I just look at the outlook that Tampa Bay has and, the way that they're traveling right now. I mean, Baker Mayfield putting up the highest passer rating in Lambeau ever, I believe is what the statistic was going around. Like no other quarterback has had a higher passer rating. That's just incredible. And so, now facing a Jacksonville Jaguars team that could be without their starter in Trevor Lawrence. And, we know that's going to be tough for Jacksonville a tough pill for them to swallow because they tried to do everything to get Trevor Lawrence into a game earlier this year when it looked like a foregone conclusion he was going to miss. So, they don't want the backup playing. I think that Tampa Bay sets themselves up for success. The Saints against the Rams this week will be a fun one. I think that'll be an interesting one. A lot of points being scored in that game. We'll see if Derek Carr can keep up. But yeah, Tampa Bay kind of controls their own destiny because after that, they do get that matchup with New Orleans, like you're saying, and they close out against Carolina. So, I mean, you got to be able to handle business on your schedule here and really take advantage. Love that they're hosting that home game against Jacksonville. And I think, it's their division to lose. And it hasn't been talked about, but Baker being able to take this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, back to the playoffs after, being a year removed from losing Tom Brady, the GOAT, and what was going to be happening there. And not even knowing that he was going to be, the week 1 starter until, whatever it was, the last preseason game. So, very, very excited for the redemption comeback on Baker as well.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch, and like he's playing great. It wasn't just that Packers game. He didn't play well against Atlanta. He actually kind of struggled in that game outside of that final drive. But like overall, it's been a very good year for Baker Mayfield, which is fun to watch given the public dumping in Cleveland and all that stuff. They get the Jags this week, the Saints, and then the Panthers, as you mentioned. Saints get the Rams, and then go to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. That game is in Tampa, and I think that does matter a lot for this market as well. It's a big part of why the Bucs are -134 right now. That's another game in week 17 that will be an absolute delight to discuss. Any other futures you are eyeing, Ryan, as we get set for week number 16?
Well, looking in the defensive player of the year market, I do think there is merit for TJ Watt at +400. I'm thinking about game record for Cleveland. I do think that will be an interesting one if they're able to make the playoffs. Micah Parsons being the favorite there. He's had so many great games this season, but as of late, he's kind of been out of the mix, so to speak. And I think that does kind of factor in. TJ Watt has been the absolute catalyst for Pittsburgh for all this time. And I think it gets overshadowed with how much the offense has struggled. But I mean, this is a guy who, is upper echelon when it comes to attacking the quarterback. And so if he can, get his sack numbers up and, reach a nice plateau there, I do think that that's merit for him there. But it does seem like a three-headed race. When we're talking about the make playoffs market, I just kind of alluded to, Green Bay giving up a big game to Baker, but I think they are, Green Bay being 3-1 to make the playoffs. So playoff picture is shaping up. It just seems like with them having the longest yards here or longest odds in this market, it seems like a little bit unreasonable to take a shot on them with the way they close out their season as well too, as they won't have to play against many playoff teams for these next 3 games. So I think that's an interesting one as well. And then we keep an eye on the Super Bowl market each time, and I do find it very interesting that the Buffalo Bills are rearing their head once again. But you got to scroll down, Jim. You got to scroll down for their odds that at 14-1 here. And there is merit for them to end up winning this division, which seemed like an absolute anomaly a couple weeks back. And I think that head-to-head matchup with Miami, to close out is really going to be, an interesting one if the Bills can handle business here, especially if the Dolphins are dealing with injuries across the board on offense. So I think at 14-1, the home playoff game to start in a wild card that is likely against Cleveland or whoever gets into that matchup there, and I just really think that people don't want to have to travel to Buffalo in January to have to play, and we know that they can keep up with the top tier teams in the AFC. So I think a match to get to the Super Bowl is still well within favor. And we've talked about the market. Like, I didn't think Josh Allen could do enough to get back into the MVP race, but here he is once again. But, I think the best market still to get Buffalo futures on is for them in that Super Bowl market.
You mentioned the division. They would need the Dolphins to lose a game before their matchup in Week 18, but the Dolphins face the Cowboys and the Ravens before then. Like, that's insane. Like, from a scheduling perspective, whereas the Bills get the Chargers and then the Patriots before that game. Like, they may not play the second half of either of those games. So I'm just going to check plus 220 to win the AFC East. I don't think that's crazy. So I agree with you, Ryan. I think that's at least intriguing. I like that call out, and I think the Bills might do it. It's pretty interesting. That is Ryan Williams. Make sure you check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Ryan, a pleasure to have you on the show for today. Happy holidays. We'll talk to you once again next Tuesday to talk futures once again.
Yeah. Covering the spread. We appreciate that. And Jim, I'll catch you next time, my man.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan, as always. That is Ryan Williams. Find him on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. We're going to dive into Week 16. We'll talk about that Ravens versus 49ers game within that to get you ready for that one, and also let you know other spots where my model shows value for this week. But first, score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame money line wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts. Or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's dig in now to Week 16 and outline where my models show value over at FanDuel Sportsbook for this week. And let's begin things with that very fun matchup on Monday night between the Ravens and the 49ers. Right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, the Niners are favored by 5.5, -115 there. And I actually do like the 49ers in this game, and it makes me feel optimistic to lay 5.5 against Lamar Jackson and arguably the best team in the AFC right now. But I think the 49ers might just be that good. My secondary model does have these as the top two teams in football, and it makes it spread directly on 5.5. So that one says the market here is very correct. But my primary model, the one that performs better, the one that's had a better ROI, has the 49ers by more than a touchdown in this spot. That model is a little bit lower on Baltimore because it weighs passing efficiency more heavily, and the 49ers lapping the field in that category, and the Ravens above average, but, not outlandishly above average in that department. So it makes sense they'd be a bit lower in that one, but it also does perform better when you back test it and bet using it. There also is a chance that the Ravens could play this game without left tackle Ronnie Stanley. He left Sunday night's game with a concussion, and it'd be a pretty tough proposition to not have Stanley out there when you're taking on this defensive line. They're also missing Mark Andrews and Keaton Mitchell, as Ryan mentioned. So I know it feels weird to lay 5.5 against a team as good as the Ravens are, but I think the 49ers are kind of a supernova right now, and it's important for me to be in on them until the market fully adjusts to how good they are. So I like the Ravens. I have a Ravens Super Bowl ticket already for this year. I think they're potentially the best team in the AFC, but I think the Niners are just that good. So I'll lay the 5.5 with the Niners in this matchup, -115 at FanDuel Sportsbook to take the 49ers in this game against the Ravens on Monday night. I also would say I show value in the over in this game that is correlated with the spread. So could potentially check out a same game parlay here, -5.5 and over 45.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook to bet both those two together. It's not parlaying them right now, but you could potentially do that because those two bets are correlated as well with the Niners, the spread there and the over as well. Other money line or spread where I'm showing value for this week is one we alluded to with Ryan. That is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And right now, pretty even market here. The Bucs are -108 to win this game, as are the Jaguars. And I do show value in the Buccaneers to win this one. We have seen players clearing concussion protocol more quickly this year than they were earlier on this year. But I still think there's a decent shot that Trevor Lawrence can't go in this game, in which case I think this number would move a pretty decent amount in Tampa Bay's favor. I don't think this would be a dead ticket, even if Lawrence were to play. So it's kind of, weighing the odds that Lawrence does clear and weighing what the spread would be in that scenario versus what it would be if he sits, and kind of taking those probabilities to get yourself a conglomerate number here. But I think that once I do those calculations, do that mental math, I think that this is a good spot to buy into the Bucs with the information we have right now. In large part because this Jags defense really struggling right now. They're getting shredded through the air recently. They have underperformed expectations on early downs against the pass relative to their matchup in 6 of their past 7 games. 5 of those were by significant margins as well. And so that's the defense. Defense is kind of banged up, not playing all that well right now. But the offense, even if Lawrence can play, will not have Christian Kirk. They will not have Cam Robinson. And Zay Jones, labeled as week to week, hurt his hamstring late against the Ravens. So it would be Calvin Ridley, Parker Washington, and Jamal Agnew in 3 receiver sets for the Jags That's not really what you want, even if Lawrence is able to go. So the primary motivation for me being on the Bucs is the uncertainty around Lawrence. And I think there's enough there where I could lay bet the Bucs money line at -108, but the rest of the team's health for the Jags also allows me to take it, even with the possibility Lawrence is still able to go. So I'll take the Bucs here, -108. I think that's a good spot to get them at. And I do feel good about the Bucs in this matchup as they take on the Jaguars. So 2 spreads or money lines, Ravens or the 49ers -5.5, and then the Bucs money line at -108 as well. Couple of totals where I'm showing value for this week. The first one is honestly a head scratcher to me. That is the Commanders taking on the Jets. Right now, the total is 37.5. Under is -105. And unless Aaron Rodgers plans to play in this game, I cannot see a reason why this total is as high as it is right now. If Zach Wilson cannot go in this one, Trevor Siemian would get the start, and the Jets offense has been an abject disaster without Wilson this year. Maybe it's Brett Rippon. I guess I did say it'd be Siemian, so not a great situation for this Jets offense regardless. Robert Saleh didn't rule out Aaron Rodgers, but Rodgers had previously said he would play only if the Jets were still alive for the playoffs. Maybe those plans have changed, and it's possible that Rodgers does play, but it seems like one of the less likely scenarios for this game. Even with the Commanders' defense being historically awful, like hideous, like I felt really good laying the 6.5 for the Rams last week against them because of this defense, I still got this total at 33.5. And it's, again, 37.5 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, under -105. So a big gap between my model and the market, and that gap matters more the lower the total is. That's even with wind speeds in East Rutherford right now at 4 miles per hour, meaning that total could decrease even more if the wind were to go up. The Jets defense playing very well right now, playing well enough to keep the Commanders in check, and I don't know how the Jets light up the scoreboard with their current offensive personnel. Unless Rodgers pulls a fast one on us, I think this number should be lower. So I'll take the Jets and Commanders under 37.5, -105 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Again, unless Rodgers plays, which I don't expect, I think that this is a good value to take the under in this game. Final total I like for this week is going right back to the Colts. I've been on a lot of unders for the Colts this year, which has obviously not gone very well because they play chaotic games. They tend to play towards the over a lot. They're 10-4 towards the over so far this year. But I think a lot of that has been variance, and I don't care as much about that when they're facing a team like the Falcons. Now, the pace in this game is fast overall, both for the Colts and the Falcons, so I understand why it is where it is. But it's also 2 non-elite offenses, both teams starting backup quarterbacks with Heineke, now starting for the Falcons, Gardner Minshew for the Colts. So it's tough for me to get to a number, a key number above a key number, get to a total above a key number in 44. The Falcons have been bad this year offensively, but they get even worse once you adjust for the soft schedule they faced. They're 21st in early down passing efficiency straight up, but they fall to 26th once you account for the opponents they have faced. Their rush defense has been fantastic this year, so that would push the Colts to pass the ball. And passing the ball is good for overs because it's more efficient and because it stops the clock. But the Colts may be less efficient than usual in terms of passing if Michael Pittman can't go following that really scary hit in the game on Saturday. Given that the Colts defense has been, I think, better than perception so far this year, I am fine taking the under despite a very fast pace in this one. Again, it's a fast pace. The Colts have played towards the over this year, so I understand why it's at 44.5, but that just seems like a pretty big number for 2 not great offenses and 2 not terrible defenses. So I'm okay going towards the under here. Colts and Falcons under 44.5, which is -115 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. So to recap, spots where I'm showing value as of right now: Colts, Falcons under 44.5 at -115. I've got the Jets and Commanders under 37.5, -105. The Bucs money line at -108, and the 49ers -5.5 as they take on the Ravens. That one is -115 as well. Before we close up for today, got to go back through recommendations from last week here on the show across our various guests. Let's begin things by talking about Dr. Ed Feng, who is with us on Thursday to preview NFL Week 15. You can find Ed on Twitter at the Power Rank and check out his work at thepowerrank.com. 1-1 week for Ed. The win was on the Lions, -4.5, taking on the Broncos. Talked a lot about turnover luck breaking in favor of the Broncos, and they didn't get turnovers in that game. Jared Goff shredded them, and the Lions coasted to a cover in that one. So a good win there for Ed. He had the Jags +3.5 against the Ravens, and you kind of can't account for Trevor Lawrence fumbling by himself in the red zone, apparently suffering a concussion at some point during that game as well. So 1-1 week for Ed. Tough luck on the Jags, given that there was the Ridley touchdown as well. Potentially could have covered in that game, but didn't quite get the job done. So 1-1 week for Ed. We had JJ Zacharyson back with us on Friday to talk about some player props. Find JJ on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Find his work at LateRound.com and the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. JJ hit another longer touchdown bet for this week. That one was Clyde Edwards-Helaire at +290. Edwards-Helaire had a good roll on Sunday once again. Got the touchdown against the Patriots. Over did hit in that game as well. CH +290, a win for JJ. Yardage bets went 1-1. He had Josh Downs over 42.5 receiving yards at -114. Did get Pittman. Pittman did get banged up in that game and left early, but Downs still just 3 catches for 19 yards. So couldn't quite get there. As the Colts didn't really have to throw very much. Trey Sermon, a lot of work in the second half for them. Did have Khalil Shakir under 27.5 receiving yards, -114, and Shakir had 0 because the Bills threw the ball 5 times in that game. Josh Allen under 100 yards passing, so easy under with Shakir at 27.5 for JJ. Other touchdown bets beyond CEH were Josh Downs +260, TJ Hawkinson +210, Jordan Addison monopolized the touchdowns for the Vikings, so good hit for JJ with the CEH at +290 and also hit on the Khalil Shakir one. So hopefully a profit for you, depending on how you scaled things in following JJ stuff. We had Austin Cass with us on Friday to talk about the EPL. You can find Austin on Twitter at Austin Cass. Find his work over at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior editor. 2-1 week for Austin once again. He had Liverpool -125 to win the first half and the match as they were taking on Manchester United. But Man United kept that thing close the entire game. They had a draw in the first half and for the full game, 0-0, the final in that one. So good job by them to bounce back, but no win for Liverpool, -125 to win the first half of the match. Other two were winners, though, for Austin. Newcastle coming through once again. Austin liked the Newcastle money line -120, and they won 3-0. Newcastle, he's had a perfect read on them so far this year, whether for or against them. So another win in the column there for Newcastle at -120. And finally, Austin's one player prop was Cole Palmer to score or assist at -120. And Palmer had a goal in the 54th minute for Chelsea as they won that one, I believe, 2-0. But either way, a win with the Cole Palmer score or assist market. So good job by Austin. 2-1 week for him. You can find Austin on Twitter at Austin Cass. We'll get Austin back with us after the new year. EPL is off the final or the first week of the new year. So second week, we'll get Austin back on to talk more EPL. Alluded to this before, but Ryan had a fantastic night last night on Monday Night Football. Find Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Traditional markets, only one he liked was the under at 45. That did go up once it was announced that Jalen Hurts would be good to go. Closed at 46.5, I think. But regardless, easy under there, 37 total points in that game. So a no sweat winner there for Ryan Williams. He had DeAndre Swift over 58.5 rushing yards. Swift had 74. Good usage for Swift. I know Kenneth Gainwell got a lot early in that game, but not a lot late. And so Swift goes over 58.5. So a win for Ryan there. He had Dallas Goedert over 4.5 receptions at +118. Goddard had 4, so a loss there, but a tight one. One of only 2 losses for Ryan. Other loss was Noah Fant over 21.5 receiving yards. I think he finished with 18 or so there, but regardless, a loss. The other wins for Ryan. He had DK Metcalf over 63.5 receiving yards at -113. DK got there on that final drive. He also had Metcalf over 23.5 as his longest reception. Metcalf did get that 34 yards on his longest reception in that one. That was -113. Another winner on the final drive was Jackson Smith and Jigba over 43.5 receiving yards. Really sick catch by JSN on that touchdown. Finished with 48 yards for a win for Ryan there at -113. Final one was Jason Myers over 6.5 kicking points at -102. Myers was there before the final drive, so didn't need that final drive to get there. I think he had 8 total points. So he had 7 for the extra point there. That was -102 for Ryan. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-2 night for Ryan Williams. Again, fantastic night for him. And again, Drew Lock getting wins for his high school and his college as well. I was 3-1 on the week. Did get a win last night in that Seahawks-Eagles game. I had the under at 48 at -110 from back on Tuesday. Talked about that before the uncertainty with Hurts. So that didn't play a factor in that one. Just thought it was going to be a lower scoring game. My model had that one at 44.5, and it did finish with 37 total points. So a win there. One loss for me was not a good one. It was the Cowboys money line +116. Whoops. Not a great call there. The good thing though, is it doesn't matter how bad you lose, just a matter of whether you win or lose. And I lost that one. And it would have been a loss whether they had lost by 1 or if they had lost by 21. So, hey, it is what it is. Other winners for me, I had the Colts -2.5 on Saturday against the Steelers. That did shift to 1.5 once TJ Watt cleared concussion protocol. Kind of thought he might sit out that game, but he did not. But it didn't matter. The Colts cruised in that second half to win that game pretty easily. And then I had the Rams -6.5 against the Commanders. Got a little nervous as Jacoby Brissett scored a couple of late touchdowns there. Ron Rivera could have gone for 2. And if he had gone for 2 and made it, that would have been a 6-point game and I would have lost. But instead, Rivera decided to kick, despite the fact his placeholder was hurt. So kicked the field goal, the extra point. They missed it. So it was, it wound up being an 8-point game there. I also didn't talk about this in the show, but I had under 49.5. So if Rivera had gone for 2, not only would it have ruined my Rams -6 and -6.5 and -110, I also would have lost my under at 49.5. So shout out Ron Rivera, coach of the year in my book, for deciding to kick and miss it. I appreciate you as always. And thank you for your service. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. One final thank you to Ryan Williams, our guest from earlier on. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. As mentioned, Ryan back with us next Tuesday. No show Monday because that is Christmas. So back with us on Tuesday. Talk some futures and get ready for NFL Week 17. Schedule for this week, 4 shows. We do have Primetime Tom coming up for you on Thursday. Or Wednesday to get you ready for the Thursday night game. Pretty fun one between the Rams and Saints. That'll be on the Covering the Spread podcast feed and FanDuel TV Plus. And then no show for us on Friday due to the holidays. So we'll be with you Monday through Thursday, talking NFL and more right here on the feed. To get all those shows as they are posted, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can find us on FanDuel TV Plus and the FanDuel YouTube page as well. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can also find me on Threads at Jim.Sonis. You can follow FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets across Tuesday. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow right here on Covering the Spread. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.